Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hey yo. Welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is our TNA show for the week. Sorry about that, folks. I had to do a little Scott Hall impression to start it off with. Let's jump right into the show, shall we? First up, we're going to go into our so-so segments. They weren't bad, they weren't good, they were just there. The whole thing with the bromance and the menagerie, I see where they're going. I understand that Robbie needs to be written off of TV to go do the Amazing Race. But the whole Scared of Clowns thing, it went on a little too long. It was a little bit goofy. The one thing I thought was funny was the Freak. His mask came off when he threw his eye onto the outside and they tried really hard to hide it, which was kind of funny. Good thing it was a tape show because they could edit around any time you seen it was actually Rob Terry. But just a weird segment that went on a little too long. I like both groups. I like the bromance and I like the menagerie, so I kind of expect more from the two. Next up, kind of the same situation. Mr. Anderson dressed as Sheriff Ken or Sheriff Anderson in a very much what you would dress a 5-year-old in if they wanted to dress up as a cowboy, making fun of James Storm, which brings out Storm. They brawl for a bit, Storm gets the upper hand. I don't know, I just think you got two guys. We've seen Ken Anderson do this mocking gimmick a few times. Sometimes it hits, sometimes it misses. This was one that missed for me. I think these are two guys that are in your top tier of talent in the company, and they should be used better, in my opinion. Now, coming off of that, we would normally go into our bad segment of the night. Now, being as I watched TNA and I didn't find anything really horribly bad about it, so we're going to skip that altogether and go right into our question of the week. Question of the week last week was, what would you name the group that MVP has with him, Bobby Lashley, and Kenny King? We got an answer from our friend Zombies40. I think going by what MVP says now, the money, power, respect line, that should be their name, MPR. I kind of like that. I like that as a name. I like that you could shorten it down to 3 letters. Obviously, he sells T-shirts that way. For those that don't know, the line's actually from a Lock song of the same name, Money, Power, Respect, where they say it's the key to life. Money, power, respect. But anyway, so I don't know, because he pretty much blatantly copies the whole lyric. I don't know if they'd be able to use that marketing wise, but I do like the name. I think it's a good name. In my opinion, I think on a similar line, and it's something that I was thought about. There's a independent wrestler that I'm friends with on Facebook named Justin Fireball. He had put out a question about what your favorite Doors song was, and this is what reminded me of this, and this is what got me thinking about the name I would use. People had answered all their songs, like My Fire, all that good stuff, all the great songs the Doors have. I personally answered 5-1 just because it's my favorite of the Doors songs. It was a song that my mom played over and over as a kid. Something that got drilled into my head, something that as I grew older and older, I enjoyed myself. Now, another independent manager, who's also a friend of mine, Tommy Thompson, answered the same thing as me, and it kind of was cool to see that someone else had that same thought. And his reasoning, part of his reasoning was it was sampled in The Takeover, a song by Jay-Z, which I remembered that too. Wasn't my exact reason for why I liked it, but it kind of got me thinking. I like that name. I like that name for a group, The Takeover, which is kind of what they did. I think they should go with that. I like the connotations of it. They took over TNA. They're taking over the wrestling world. It has a hip hop theme to it, which we see that MVP raps his own entrance music. So I like that idea. I thought it was cool, so that's my thought process and how I got to that. But coming off of that, we're going to go into our question of the week for this week. Who do you think the most misused talent in TNA is right now? Let us know what you think. Hit us up on Facebook, hit us up on Twitter. Put it down where? Down there in the comments. And while you're at it, hit the like button. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go into the good portion of the night, the stuff that I actually really enjoyed. First up, we had the opening segment, and yes, you know I bury these usually. We had Samoa Joe coming out after a surprise return last week, which brought out MVP, King, and Lashley. He offers to fight all three of them, which brings out Austin Aries. Let MVP in his overpowering way makes a match between Austin Aries and Samoa Joe. Loser gets fired for later in the night. So it sets up a match. It has a good storyline going forward. I don't mind it so much. It's when we have these long drawn-out things that basically see the same thing over and over again that I start being bothered by them. Now this goes right into our next match. Now this was something. If you watched the show last week, I even mentioned it then. I was going to be pissed off and dislike. Bram versus Willow. This match came off way better than I could ever imagine it could have. Jeff Hardy, for the first time since he's been the Willow character, he altered his style. And maybe it's the way that the announcers TNA and Taz were calling it that made it that way, because he used the same moves but in a more violent way, like the coming off the steps, coming out of the ring. You know, more of a, how can I say this in a nice way, more of a, like a Sabu type way, where he was seen more dangerous as Willow than he is as Jeff Hardy. Which kind of, you know, is the big problem I have with the character is he wrestles the same as Jeff Hardy, does the same moves and everything. Match ends when Bram is going to hit a Willow with a pry bar, which brings out Magnus, grabs a pry bar from him, and voila, Magnus goes to work on Willow, beating him down with the pry bar. Bram finally gets what he's been trying to get out of Magnus, the vicious, sadistic side that he knows has been in him. I think this is great. I love to see a team of Bram and Magnus going forward as a vicious, kind of Road Warrior style team where they just beat people down. I think it could be very successful for the two. I think Magnus needs quite a lot of rebuilding coming off of that lackluster title run. Not saying that that was his fault, but I think we need to build him back up. Coming off of that, we had another match that was made by MVP as kind of a way to screw the faces. We have Eddie Edwards versus Davey Richards, and they're told if they don't actually fight each other, they're going to get stripped of their tag titles. Kenny King comes out on the stage to observe. Eddie and Davey put on a wrestling clinic. I thought it was absolutely great. The counters, the reverses, the submissions, everything they did was really cool. Really cognizant of what both of these guys could do as top-tier talent wrestling-wise in the middle of the ring. At the end, Eddie pulls out the win. Kenny King comes in and says, no, wait. You guys, you normally kick people in the face, you punch people. We want to see somebody get kicked. We want to see somebody get punched, which obviously leads to them both attacking Kenny King. Which was alright, pretty cool. I enjoyed this whole thing. The wrestling aspect of the two against each other, I think, is great. I think they're two of the best in-ring wrestlers in the world today, and they definitely showed on this. Which sets us up for our next match, which was also another MVP abusive power type match. Joe versus Austin Aries. Before the match, Brian Hebner is told by MVP, there won't be any ties, no double countouts, no double disqualifications, no double pins. There has to be a winner and loser. Eric Young and Bully Ray stop him, say to do the right thing as well. We get the match. Joe and Aries are going at it. EY and Bully come down to the ring right as Brian Hebner, I'm sorry, I keep wanting to say Dave. I know that's Earl's brother, not his son. Brian Hebner, they pull him out of the ring. He says he's doing his job. Bully hits him, apologizes. They go in the ring, pretty much say that this was a farce. They're not going to let it go on, which brings out MVP and his crew. The face team, Joe, Aries, Bully, and Eric Young, they make a challenge to the heels. The heels seem to not want to accept it. Then Kenny King says, no, we'll take it. We'll take you up on that. Joe suggests it's a first blood match. Voila, we have our main event. Great setup, great interaction. We're seeing the battle lines being drawn between who's going to be on this side and who's going to be on MVP's side. MVP and his crew add EC3, which we'll get into in a bit, which leads us into our next match, which was set up from last week for the Knockouts title. Madison Rayne versus Angelina Love. A decent match, more of a storyline builder. Brittany was told before the match to not interfere. She comes down to the ring. The Beautiful People double team. She doesn't interfere, which causes Madison to lose to Angelina. She questions her in the back as to why she didn't help, and she says, you told me not to. So I think we're going to see a lot more coming out of this love triangle, or love affection, or stalking, or whatever you want to call it, that Brittany's doing with Madison. I like that. I'd like to see that the Beautiful People are breaking off from Madison. Hopefully, more going in the route of other wrestlers like ODB and Gail Kim. I think it's just the more you can get the knockouts involved, the more well-rounded it'll be. Get a solid knockout division going again. Taryn Terrell is supposedly coming back very soon, so the whole division looks to be on an upswing. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go right into our main event. 4-on-4 first blood match. Kenny King, MVP, Bobby Lashley, and Ethan Carter III versus Samoa Joe, Eric Young, Austin Aries, and Bully Ray. A decent 8-man tag match. They get the faces get the win when Bully hits EC3 with a chain in the face. All around a good brawling type match, a good war type match. Kind of maybe setting up a war game style match 4-on-4 at some point. I think it was cool. I like what they did. I liked afterwards, and when they did the thing in the back where King, MVP, and Lashley are beating up EC3 for costing them the match, and Dixie Carter comes out and says, you know, that's my blood, that's literally my blood, you wanted a war, you're going to bleed, all this good stuff, setting up yet another side of the war. So there's going to be 3 sides of this war. You got the faces, you got the heel MVP faction, and the heel Dixie faction, which is all going to accumulate at some point in one big battle for the soul of TNA, I guess. But a good way to go off the air. The one last thing I did want to mention, and it's been kind of one of my favorite things, I think Samuel Shaw, outside of TNA, and even in the ring and everything there, has been the highlight of the show. Him and Gunner playing Go Fish, looking at his drawings, I thought it was really cool. A really neat way to show a different side of Samuel Shaw, show that he's not that different than you and me. He might be a weird, creepy bastard stalker, but he does some of the things that we do. Somewhere in there, he snapped and that turned him that way. And Gunner's trying to get him back to being normal. I liked it. I hope everybody else did as well. Coming off of that, we're going to go into our rating system. Now, if you've seen the show before, you know we have a 1 to 5 scale. 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. 1's a Dixie Carter, 2's a Rockstar Spud, 3's a Gunner, 4's a James Storm, 5's a Bobby Roode. I'm going to give the show a 5, a Bobby Roode. As you can see, I didn't think anything was overly bad. The 2 things I thought were so-so were basically personal preference kind of issues. They weren't so bad that I wanted to turn off the TV while I was watching, so just little minor issues I had with it, but overall, very enjoyable TNA Impact show, very fun show to watch, lots of storyline going forward, lots of intrigue setting up the matches leading into their next pay-per-view. But basically, that's what all I have to say about that. My name is George Coles, and this has been another episode of Heel Heat.